We use it every single day, right? For work, for fun, to talk to people. It's just there. But have you ever stopped to think about where the internet actually came from? It wasn't just some single invention that popped up overnight. Nope. It was actually the solution to a really, really serious problem. So let's dive into the incredible origin story of the global network that completely changed the world.
But hang on, before we go back in time, let's just ask a super basic question. We're all using it this very second, but what is this thing? Is it a cloud? Some kind of magic signal in the air? Not exactly.
At its very core, the internet is just a gigantic worldwide network that links millions and millions of computers. Simple enough? But the real magic, the part that's so easy to take for granted, is how it all works so seamlessly. The story of how a message gets from my screen to yours in the blink of an eye, well, that story starts decades ago, in a world on the very brink of conflict.
To really get the internet, you have to go all the way back to the Cold War. See, the US military had this massive challenge on its hands. All of its communication systems were centralized, and that meant they were incredibly vulnerable.
Think about it like an old-school telephone system. To make a call, the system would open up one single dedicated line between you and the other person. Now, what happens if that line gets cut, say during an attack? The whole communication is gone, kaput. For a military that absolutely has to maintain command and control, that kind of weak point just wasn't going to fly. They needed a totally new way of thinking.
Now, the solution didn't just come from one person. It was more like this brilliant idea that was bubbling up in different places at the same time. You had J.C.R. Licklider in the U.S. dreaming up this galactic network. Meanwhile, Paul Baran at the RAND Corporation was working on the military problem, trying to design a distributed network that had no central point of failure. And get this, all the way over in the UK, a guy named Donald Davies was working on a very similar idea, completely on his own.
All of these different lines of thought, they all pointed to one revolutionary concept. And this is really the technical heart of the internet, packet switching. This was the elegant, almost beautiful solution that made a survivable, decentralized network a real possibility.
Okay, let's really see the difference here. On the left, you have circuit switching. That's the old way, that one vulnerable phone line. If it breaks, your conversation is over. But packet switching, on the right, now that's a whole different ballgame. It doesn't send your data in one big, fragile stream. Instead, it does something way smarter. It chops it all up into tiny little pieces.
So here's the key idea. Your data, whether it's an email, a photo, this video, it gets broken up into thousands of little packets. Each of those packets gets stamped with the final destination's address, kind of like a digital postcard. Then they're all sent out onto the network to travel completely on their own, taking all sorts of different routes to get to where they're going. And if one path is blocked or destroyed, no big deal. The packets just find another way around.
But wait, you've got all these packets from different networks flying around. How do they all talk to each other? That's where two legends, Vince Cerf and Bob Kahn, come into the picture. They developed something called TCP/IP, which you can just think of as the universal language of the internet. It's the set of rules for the road that all those packets have to follow. TCP makes sure every single packet arrives safely, and IP makes sure they all go to the right address. This is the protocol that turned a chaotic mess of separate networks into the single, unified internet we all use.
So, with the theory all figured out, it was time to actually build this thing. And this is the part of the story where a small military experiment starts its journey to becoming the global utility that we can't live without today.
You know, the internet's beginnings were just incredibly humble. I love this story about the very first message ever sent on its predecessor, the ARPANET, back in '69. The plan was to type log in. Simple, right? Well, they typed L, it worked. They typed O, still working. Then they typed G, and the whole system crashed. So the first message ever sent on the internet was low. You can't make this stuff up. A pretty fittingly modest start for a technology that was about to take over the planet.
As you look at this timeline, you can really see the pieces clicking into place. After that first low in 1969, the next huge leap was in '83, when TCP/IP became the standard. That's when it really became one unified network. Then, in '86, the National Science Foundation built this super high-speed backbone called NSFNet, linking up universities. But the real spark, the moment that truly lit the fuse for all of us, came in 1991.
And we really can't overstate how important this NSFNet was. By creating this powerful new backbone for researchers and academics, it basically took the baton from the military's ARPANET. This was the critical handoff. This is what started pushing the internet out of the military's hands and toward becoming a public resource.
But even with this growing network, it was still pretty clunky. You kind of had to be a computer scientist to use it. That all changed thanks to two final, absolutely crucial innovations that really and truly unleashed its power on the rest of us.
It was a 1-2 punch. First, in 1991, Tim Berners-Lee gave us the World Wide Web. Now, this wasn't the internet itself. It was a super user-friendly way to access the information on it, using things like web browsers and clickable links. All of a sudden, anyone could use it. Then, second, in 1995, the government retired the NSF-Net backbone, which opened the floodgates for commercial companies, internet service providers, to jump in. The internet was officially open for business.
And just like that, things exploded. The web was growing like crazy, but it was total chaos. Like a giant library where someone had just thrown all the books on the floor. In 1994, Yahoo came along and tried to be the librarian, creating the first big directory to help people find anything.
Then, just a year later, a new little company called Amazon decided to use this network to do something that sounded kinda nuts at the time: sell books online. The very idea that you could click a button on your computer and a real physical book would just show up at your house, that was a game changer. The age of e-commerce had begun.
By '97, the web was so huge that even having librarians like Yahoo wasn't enough. It was too big. We needed an automated way to find the needle in this massive digital haystack, and that's when Google showed up with a killer algorithm that would forever change how we find information.
The next big shift wasn't just about finding stuff, it was about connecting with each other. In 2004, a simple website for college students called Facebook launched. It tapped into this basic human desire to connect and ended up laying the groundwork for the entire social media era.
And finally, in 2005, the last barrier came crashing down. YouTube made it ridiculously easy for anyone with a camera to share a video with the entire globe. This totally reshaped media, culture, everything, and cemented the internet as the center of our modern world.
When you step back and look at it, the journey is just mind-blowing. A technology that was born from the fear of nuclear war, designed simply to survive an attack, somehow evolved in just a couple of decades into this global social and economic fabric that touches pretty much everything we do.
Which brings us to a really interesting question for today. The internet was built on this core principle of decentralization. No one person, no one company, no one government is in charge. But now, as it becomes so central to our lives, our economies, our societies, who gets to write the next set of rules? That's a huge question, and one we're all going to have a say in answering. Thanks for tuning in.